The great city of Zathar was filled with shining towers and glowing streets. It was a place built by the alien rulers known as the Valari. They were tall, strong, and proud of their long history. To them, humans were only workers and soldiers. Never equals, humans were allowed to live in the city, but always under the shadow of Valari power. Among the humans sent to Zathar was a soldier named Darren. He was chosen not because he was the strongest or the cleverest, but because he was steady and calm. The Valari believed he would obey their orders without trouble. Darren was sent as part of a peace agreement between the two peoples. To seal this agreement, the Valari gave him something unusual. They gave him a woman of their own kind. Her name was Alira. She was a noblewoman, daughter of one of the great houses of the Valari. The Valari Council called her Darren's trophy, a symbol of human obedience. They thought Darren would accept her as property, a prize to keep him loyal. When Darren first saw her, he was silent. Alira stood tall, her eyes cold, her voice sharp. She looked at him as if he were far beneath her. Round them, the Valari nobles laughed and whispered. To them, this union was only a show. They expected Darren to act proud of his gift and Alira to suffer in silence. But Darren did not smile. He did not bow to the Valari. Instead, he looked at Alira with steady eyes and spoke in a simple, calm voice. "You are not my trophy," he said. "You are free to walk beside me if you choose." The hall grew quiet. Some Valari nobles frowned, while others laughed louder, mocking him. They thought he was foolish, a human who did not understand his place. Alira herself looked at him with surprise. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even among her own people. In the days that followed, Darren and Alira were given a house on the edge of the city. It was large and filled with fine things, but the silence between them was heavy. Alira refused to speak much to him, and Darren never forced her. He spent his time walking through the city, speaking with human workers, listening to their troubles. Alira watched him from a distance. She had been raised to see humans as lesser beings, tools for her people's empire. But Darren confused her. He was not weak, though he had no great power. He was not bitter. Though he lived under the rule of her people, he carried himself with quiet strength, a strength that came not from weapons or titles, but from his spirit. One evening, Alira finally asked him, "Why do you not treat me as your possession? That is what the council gave me to be." Darren looked at her calmly. "Because you are not a thing to own. You are a person, and no person should be a trophy." His words unsettled her. She wanted to argue, but she found no answer. For the first time in her life, someone saw her not as a noble, not as a symbol, but simply as herself. The next day, an attack shook the outer district of the city. A group of rival Valari rebels tried to strike at the ruling houses. Alira was caught outside the walls when it happened. She had gone with her guards to see the markets, but the rebels ambushed them. The guards fell quickly, leaving her alone. It was Darren who found her. He had been nearby, speaking to human workers. When he saw the chaos, he ran to her without hesitation, armed only with a simple blade. He fought off the attackers long enough to pull her to safety. The rebels were stronger, but his courage forced them back until more guards arrived. When they finally reached safety, Alira stared at him with wide eyes. No Valari would have risked themselves for her in such a way. Darren had no duty to protect her, no reason to care. Yet he had stood against danger without fear. "You risked your life for me," she said quietly. Darren shook his head. "I risked it because it was the right thing to do, not because you belong to me." For the first time, Alira felt her view of humans begin to change. She had always seen them as small pieces in a great empire, but now she saw something else. She saw a spirit that refused to bend, even when treated as lesser. That night, as the fires of the attack burned in the distance, Alira sat alone in her room. The words of the Valari Council echoed in her mind. They had called her his trophy. But in her heart, she began to wonder if Darren was not her master, but something far greater. And deep within her, a question began to grow. What if the humans were not the weak shadows her people believed? What if they carried a strength the Valari had never understood? The city of Zathar tried to return to normal after the sudden rebel attack. The Valari rulers tightened security, sending more guards into the streets. To them, the incident was a small matter, nothing that could shake their empire. But to Alira, it had changed everything. She could not forget how Darren had stood between her and the attackers. He had no armor of high design, no powerful weapons. Yet he had fought as if his life meant little compared to hers. His courage troubled her. It was unlike the cold discipline of her own people. The Valari fought because it was their duty. Darren had fought because he chose to die in the house they shared. The silence between them slowly began to break. Alira asked questions. Though her pride made her voice sharp, Darren answered with patience, never raising his tone. At first, she asked small things. Why did humans endure their low place without rebellion? Why did they still work, still serve? When they were treated as less, Darren told her simply, because we believe in tomorrow. Even in hardship, we look to the future. If not for us, then for those who come after us. The words stayed with her. She had grown among Valari who cared only for their present glory, their houses, and their power. The idea of suffering for a brighter tomorrow was strange to her. As days passed, Alira began to notice other things. She saw how humans in the city treated one another. Even in poverty, they shared food. Even in weakness, they protected their young. Among her people, strength was the only law, and the weak were left behind. But humans did not abandon their weak. They lifted them up. One afternoon, while walking through the market with Darren, she witnessed a human child stumble and fall. At once, 3 strangers rushed to help. The child's mother thanked them with tears in her eyes. Alira stood still, watching. Among Valari nobles, such a thing would have been ignored. Why did they help so quickly? She asked. Darren looked at her. Because we know how it feels to fall, and we know what it means when someone reaches to lift you again. Alira said nothing, but her heart felt unsteady. Still, her people did not look kindly on this bond. The Valari council began to whisper. They noticed how Alira walked beside Darren instead of apart. They noticed that she no longer kept her distance, that her eyes followed him in ways they should not. To them, this was dangerous. One evening, a Valari envoy came to their home. He was tall and dressed in the silver robes of the council. His eyes were hard as he looked at Darren. You forget your place. Human, the envoy said. You were given a gift to remind you of our rule. She is not your equal. Do not mistake symbols for truth. Darren did not answer at once. He simply looked at Alira, then back at the envoy. His calm voice carried more weight than anger. I will not treat her as less than she is, he said. You may call her a symbol, but to me she is a person. The envoy's face darkened, and he left, without another word. But the warning was clear. The council was watching. Later that night, Alira sat by the window, looking at the glowing towers of her city. Her world felt strange to her now. Once, she had believed the strength of the Valari could never be questioned, but in her heart, she felt a quiet doubt. She remembered the faces of the humans in the market, the way they lifted each other without hesitation. She remembered Darren's words, his calm defiance before the envoy. Do you not fear them? She asked Darren softly. He shook his head. I do not fear those who believe they are greater. I fear only becoming less than myself. The words struck her deeply. For so long, she had lived by the pride of her house, by the rules of her empire. She had never thought about what it meant to lose herself. The next test of their bond came. Only days later, a small human village on the edge of the city was raided by Valari soldiers. The soldiers claimed the humans had withheld grain. Darren heard of it from the workers he spoke with. Without waiting, he prepared to leave and help them. You cannot go, Alira told him. It is against the law to stand in the way of Valari soldiers. Darren met her eyes. Then I will break that law, because their law does not make it right. To her own surprise, Alira followed him. Together, they went to the village, where smoke rose and cries filled the air. The soldiers had taken food and beaten those who resisted. Darren stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and the villagers. The Valari soldiers laughed. "A human dares to block us? Move, or we will drag you down." But before they could act, Alira stepped beside him. Her voice rang with the authority of her noble blood. "Stop. These people will not be harmed further. You will leave them what? They need to live." The soldiers hesitated. To disobey a noble was no small matter. After a tense moment, they withdrew, though their eyes burned with anger. When it was over, the villagers looked at Darren with hope and at Alira with wonder. They whispered that perhaps not all Valari were blind to justice. As they walked back to the city, Alira felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she had stood against her own kind, not for power, not for duty, but because it was right. She glanced at Darren, who walked calmly at her side. The council had called her his trophy, but in that moment, she began to feel as if she was walking not as a prize, but as a partner, and deep in her heart, the fragile bond between them grew stronger, though she did not yet know how far it would carry them. The raid on the human village spread whispers through the streets of Zathar. Humans spoke in hushed voices about the noblewoman who had stood beside a human soldier. They spoke of Alira's command that stopped the soldiers and of Darren's defiance. That gave them courage. For the first time, people began to wonder if things could change. If a Valari noble could defend them, perhaps the Empire was not as unshakable as it seemed. But whispers are dangerous. Word reached the Valari Council quickly. Some members called it foolishness, a passing tale that would fade. Others feared it was the beginning of unrest. For too long, humans had been quiet. If they found hope, they might rise. In the days that followed, Darren noticed more eyes turning toward him when he walked through the markets. Human workers greeted him with respect, though quietly, afraid of punishment. Alira also saw it. Wherever they went, humans seemed to stand a little taller. In their presence, Alira felt torn. She had grown up as a noble, loyal to her people's rule. But each day with Darren pulled her further from that loyalty. She remembered the council calling her a trophy, a symbol meant to remind humans of their place, yet Darren never treated her as such. To him, she was neither a tool nor a gift. She was a person, and that truth unsettled her heart. One evening, as the city lights glowed beneath the tall towers, Alira spoke. "You do not understand what danger you bring upon yourself," she said to Darren. "The council will not forgive your defiance. They will not forgive that you make humans believe in hope." Darren's answer was steady. "If they fear hope, then hope is what we must give." She stared at him, unable to reply. His words carried a weight she could not deny. That same night, a group of human workers came secretly to their house. They bowed to Darren, calling him their leader. One of them, a man named Raylan, spoke for them. "You give us strength," Raylan said. "You and the noblewoman. We want to follow you. We want to fight back." Alira froze at his words. To rebel against the Empire was madness. The Valari had ruled for centuries with power no human could match. Yet she saw the fire in Raylan's eyes, the same fire she had begun to see in Darren. But Darren shook his head. "I am no leader," he said firmly. "I am only a man who will not stand aside when wrong is done. If you want change, it must come from all of you, not only me." The humans bowed again, grateful even for his refusal. They left quietly, but Alira knew their whispers would spread further. The council did not remain blind for long. Days later, Alira was summoned to stand before them. Darren wanted to come, but she insisted she must face them alone. The council chamber was vast, filled with tall pillars and glowing lights. The nobles sat in a circle, their eyes sharp with judgment. The eldest, Lord Varen, spoke first. "Alira, daughter of House Zareth," he said, "you have shamed your people. You have stood with a human against your own soldiers. You have weakened the line between ruler and servant." Alira kept her head high, though her heart raced. "I stopped cruelty," she said. "I stopped suffering. Is that shame?" The chamber filled with angry murmurs. Lord Varen's voice grew harsher. "You forget who you are. You forget that your place is above them. Do not let the weakness of humans cloud your judgment." Alira's hands trembled, But she did not lower her gaze. For the first time, she felt no pride in her noble house. Instead, she felt pride in what she had done with Darren. When she returned home, Darren was waiting. She told him what had happened, and he listened in silence. At last he said, "They fear you now, not because you are weak, but because you see them for what they are." Alira realized he was right. The council did not fear humans because of their strength. They feared humans because of their spirit, because of the hope that lived within them. A few nights later, the danger grew sharper as Darren walked back from the markets. Shadows followed him. A group of Valar youths, loyal to the council, blocked his path. "You are a disgrace," one of them said, "a human who does not know his place." They moved to strike him, but Darren did not falter. Though outnumbered, he stood tall, his blade ready. Before they could attack, Alira appeared. She had followed him in secret, fearing trouble. "Stand down," she ordered, her voice firm. The youths hesitated. She was still of noble blood, and her command carried weight. At last they withdrew, but not without spitting curses. When the danger passed, Alira turned to Darren. "They will not stop," she said. "The council will use others to silence you, to silence both of us." Darren looked at her calmly. "Then, let them try. We will not bow." For a long moment, she stared at him. The bond between them, once fragile, now grew stronger. She felt the weight of her people's anger, the threat of rebellion, and the pull of her heart all at once. The whispers in the city grew louder. Some said Darren was a fool who would bring ruin to all. Others said he was the spark of a new dawn. Alira herself did not yet know what future lay ahead, but she knew one thing with certainty. She could no longer stand apart. The council had given her as a trophy, yet with each passing day, she walked more as Darren's ally, and less as their symbol. The days in Zathar grew tense. The whispers of rebellion had spread too far to be ignored. Humans looked at Darren and Alira with hope, while many Valari looked at them with suspicion. The council could not allow such unrest to continue. One morning, a summons came. Both Alira and Darren were ordered to appear before the Valari Council in the Great Chamber. The message was clear. The rulers would decide their fate when they entered the chamber. The air was heavy with judgment. Tall pillars rose to the ceiling, and the council nobles sat in a circle, their sharp eyes fixed on the pair. Lord Varen, the eldest, spoke with a voice that carried across the hall. "Alira, daughter of House Zareth, Darren, human soldier, you stand accused of breaking the order of our empire. You have stirred hope where there should be obedience. You have dared to walk as equals when you are not." Darren remained silent, his face calm. Alira lifted her chin. She had once feared these voices, but now she felt something stronger inside her. "You call it a crime to show mercy," she said. "You call it disorder to stand against cruelty. If that is guilt, then I will not deny it." Gasps rose around the chamber. A noblewoman had spoken in defense of humans before the entire council. Lord Varen's eyes narrowed. "You disgrace your bloodline. You betray your people. Do you not see that your loyalty has been poisoned by this human?" Alira looked at Darren, then back at the council. "If loyalty means silence while injustice thrives, then I would rather be faithless. And if you call him my poison, then I say he has opened my eyes." The hall erupted in angry voices. Some shouted for her to be stripped of her title. Others demanded Darren's execution. At last, Lord Varen raised his hand, silencing the chamber. His voice grew colder than ice. "Then hear our judgment. The human shall be executed for defiance. And you, Alira, will be confined until you remember where you belong." Guards stepped forward, their weapons gleaming. Alira's heart raced, but Darren's calm did not break. He stepped closer to her and spoke softly, "Stay strong," he whispered. Before the guards could seize them, Darren acted. With swift movement, he struck one guard aside and pulled Alira with him. The chamber filled with shouts as the pair broke through the line and ran into the outer halls. They fled through the city streets, the glow of towers rising above them. Alira's breath came fast, but Darren never faltered. Behind them, soldiers gave chase, their footsteps echoing through the alleys. At last, They reached the edge of the human district. There, dozens of human workers gathered, drawn by the noise. When they saw Darren and Alira pursued by soldiers, they moved without hesitation, with stones, tools, and bare hands. They blocked the path of the guards. The soldiers shouted, ordering them to stand aside. But the humans did not move. For the first time, the people of Zather stood against their rulers, protecting one of their own. Darren and Alira slipped deeper into the district, hidden by the crowd. Only when the soldiers retreated did they finally rest in a small shelter. Alira's hands shook. They will hunt us now. They will not stop until you are dead and I am locked away. Darren looked at her, his steady eyes unshaken. Then let them hunt. We will not bend to them. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. You do not understand, Darren. You have lit a fire that cannot be put out. They will call this rebellion. They will call for war. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let it be war. For too long, your people have ruled through fear. But humans are not meant to live as shadows. And you are not meant to live as their prisoner. Alira felt her chest tighten. She had known he was strong, but in that moment she saw something greater. His strength was not only in his arms but in his spirit. And that spirit had begun to awaken the hearts of others. The next day, word of their defiance spread through the human district. Like fire, men and women spoke of the soldier who had faced the council without fear. They spoke of the noblewoman who had called injustice by its name. Some called them foolish. Others called them heroes. But one truth became clear. The line between human and Valari had begun to break. That night, a secret meeting was held in the shadows of an abandoned storehouse. Humans gathered, their voices low but filled with determination. Darren and Alira stood before them. Raylan, the man who had once come to their house, stepped forward. The council will crush us if we do nothing, he said. But if we stand together, we may yet be free. Darren, will you lead us? Darren shook his head. I will not lead alone. Change will not come from one man. It must come from all of us, standing together. The people murmured in agreement. For the first time, their fear seemed smaller than their hope. Alira looked at the faces before her. Humans who had once bowed now stood with fire in their eyes. She realized that the choice she had made in the council chamber was more than defiance. It was the beginning of something greater. As she stood beside Darren, she knew the path ahead would be filled with danger, but she also knew there was no turning back. The council had called her a traitor. They had called Darren a criminal. Yet, in the eyes of the people, they were becoming something else entirely. They were becoming the spark of a new dawn. The human district of Zather had never been so alive. By day, the people worked as they always had, carrying loads, tending markets, and serving their Valari masters. But by night, they gathered in secret, in abandoned halls, in dark alleys, and in broken warehouses. They whispered of freedom. At the center of those whispers were Darren and Alira. Darren had never asked to be a leader, yet the people looked to him as one. They saw in him the courage to stand against the council and the strength to protect them. Alira, once a symbol of Valari pride, now walked among humans without arrogance. Her voice carried the knowledge of her people and her choice to stand. With them gave their cause weight. Together, they became more than individuals. They became a pair who stood as equals, and that image spread faster than any words. One evening, a gathering filled the storehouse once more. Men, women, and children crowded inside, their eyes fixed on the pair standing before them. Raylan, the worker who had first spoken to Darren, raised his hand. The council prepares to strike again. He said, they cannot allow hope to grow. If we do nothing, they will crush us one by one. We must fight. Murmurs filled the room. Some spoke of fear, others of anger. Darren lifted his voice, steady and clear. Fighting does not mean rushing to death, he said. We must be wise. We cannot match the Valarian power, but we can outthink them. We can strike where they do not expect. We can protect our people first and grow stronger together. Alira stepped forward. I know their ways, she said. I know their supply routes, their weak points, their pride. They believe humans will never rise. That is their blindness. If we move carefully, we can show them they are wrong." The crowd listened, silent and tense. Then one voice rose, followed by another. Soon the room filled with determination. They were no longer only workers. They were no longer only survivors. They were becoming something greater. The first small victory came within days. A group of Valari soldiers set out to collect heavy taxes from the human markets. But Darren and a band of workers ambushed them in the narrow streets. They used nets, stones, and hidden traps. The soldiers, surprised and outnumbered, fled without their prize. The food and goods remained in human hands when news spread. The people cheered quietly in their homes for the first time. They had stood against the empire and won. Alira, watching, the joy in their eyes, felt something stir in her chest. She had once believed her people's empire was eternal, but now she saw that even the mightiest could be shaken by those who refused to bow. As the victories grew, so did the danger. The council sent spies to find their hiding places, patrols doubled in the streets. Posters with Darren's likeness appeared on walls, marking him as an enemy of the empire, but with every attempt to silence them, the humans grew bolder. They lit small fires of defiance across the city. Supplies meant for Valari nobles disappeared. Human prisoners were freed in daring escapes, and everywhere, people whispered the same names, Darren and Alira. One night, as the two sat together, in the quiet of their small shelter, Alira spoke softly. "They call you leader now," she said. Darren shook his head. "I'm only one man. This is not about me." She looked at him closely. "And yet they follow because of you, because you show them what they can be." His eyes met hers, calm and steady. "Then they must also see you. Without your voice, without your courage, none of this would stand. You are not their trophy. You are their queen." The words struck her deeply. She turned away, not from anger, but from the weight of what he had said. For so long, she had been bound by the pride of her people, called a symbol, called a prize. But here, standing with humans, she was becoming something else, something real. The next test came when the Valari launched a raid against another human village outside the city. This time, the humans were ready. Guided by Alira's knowledge of patrol routes, they set traps along the roads. Darren led the fighters with calm strategy, not reckless fury. When the Valari arrived, expecting fear, they met resistance instead. The battle was fierce, but brief. The humans held their ground, and the Valari soldiers retreated, their pride wounded. The village was saved when the fighters returned. The people of Zathar gathered in secret to greet them. The cheers filled the night, soft but strong. Children ran to Darren, calling his name, while others reached for Alira's hands. Thanking her with tears, Alira felt her heart swell. She was no longer the noblewoman standing above them. She was one of them, but she also knew the danger was far from over. The council would not forgive these victories. Each act of defiance would bring a harsher answer. That night, as the fires of celebration burned low, Darren and Alira stood apart, looking toward the towers of the Valari. "They will strike harder." "Now," she said. "Yes," Darren replied, "and so must we." In the silence that followed, their bond felt stronger than ever. Not a master and a trophy, not a human and a noble, but two souls standing together, carrying the hope of many. The rise of unity had begun, and there was no turning back. The Valari Council had been silent for many days, but silence was never safety. Everyone in Zathar felt the weight of it. The markets were watched more closely. Patrols carried heavier weapons. The nobles no longer walked with pride through the human streets. Instead, they traveled with guards at their sides. Inside the council hall, voices clashed in anger. Some nobles demanded the rebels be crushed at once. Others warned that if the humans were pushed too hard, rebellion might spread across other districts. At the center of the hall, Lord Vare, the most ruthless of the council, rose to speak. "These humans forget their place," he said. "They forget who rules this world. If one man and one woman can make them rise, then we must cut off their fire before it spreads. I will lead the army myself. We will strike not only the rebels, But every village that dares to shelter them, let the humans learn that hope brings only ruin. The decision was made. The council would unleash its full power on the humans of Zathor. News of the council's plan reached Darren and Alira through a secret messenger. The boy who brought the message trembled as he spoke. They are gathering soldiers at the North Gate. More than ever before, they mean to destroy everything. Darren listened carefully, his face calm but heavy. Round him, the leaders of the resistance shifted with unease. We cannot fight such an army head-on. One of them said, they will crush us in the open field. Alira raised her voice. Then we do not meet them in the open. We fight where their numbers mean less. We fight in the narrow streets, in the forests, in the shadows. We fight not to match their strength, but to break their pride. Her words steadied the room. Darren looked around at the faces of his people, tired yet burning with resolve. This is the moment. He said, if we falter, they will break us. If we stand, we can show the council that we will never bow again. Every man, every woman, every child must know their role. We are no longer slaves. We are the storm that rises. The following days were filled with preparation. Traps were set along the roads leading into the human districts. Narrow alleys were blocked with hidden barriers, ready to fall on enemy soldiers. Messages were carried in whispers to every village, telling them to prepare for both battle and escape. Alira worked beside them, guiding the plans with her knowledge of Valari tactics. She knew how the soldiers marched, how they relied on fear to control their enemies, and how quickly they grew careless when facing humans. Yet at night, when she sat alone with Darren, a shadow rested in her heart. They will not stop. She said softly, even if we win here, they will send more. They will keep sending until either we or they are broken. Darren placed his hand on hers. Steady as always. Then let it be us who do not break. Let it be us who stand until the empire itself sees the truth. When the army finally came, the earth trembled beneath their steps. Thousands of armored soldiers marched through the North Gate, their banners black against the gray sky. At their head rode Lord Vare, his armor gleaming with cold light. His voice thundered across the land. Humans of Zathor, he shouted, your rebellion ends today. Your leaders will be cast down, and your homes burned. This is the price of your defiance. The soldiers roared, and the march began. But the humans were ready. As the army moved through the outer roads, hidden traps snapped shut. Spiked logs rolled down from the hillsides, scattering the soldiers. Fires lit in the dry grass, cutting the army's formation. Panic spread through their ranks as the narrow roads forced them into tight lines. From the shadows, the rebels struck. They used stones, ropes, and stolen weapons. They struck quickly, then vanished into hidden passages. Every street became a battlefield, every corner a danger. Lord Vare's voice grew harsh with anger. Press forward, he ordered. Find the rebels and end them. But the humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like the land itself. Rising from every side, at the heart of it all stood Darren and Alira. Darren led the fighters with calm strength, never losing his focus even as chaos filled the streets. Alira moved with sharp skill, guiding them where the Valari were weakest. Together, they held the line. The people saw them and drew courage. Even in the face of overwhelming power, they did not run. For the first time, the humans of Zathor did not hide behind walls of fear. They stood as one. Night fell, and the battle raged on. Fires burned across the city, casting long shadows. The Valari soldiers, weary and frustrated, found themselves trapped in a place they thought they owned. And at the edge of the battle, Lord Vare raised his sword, his eyes locked on Darren and Alira. This ends with you, he called out. The fight was far from over, but every heart knew the final moment was drawing near. The storm had come, and its outcome would decide the fate of both peoples. The city of Zathor burned through the night, yet the fires did not weaken the humans. If anything, they strengthened their resolve. The streets echoed with the sounds of battle-clanging weapons, shouted orders, and cries of determination. At the center of it all, Darren and Alira stood side by side. The council had thrown everything they had against the rebellion, but the humans had learned quickly every trap, every ambush. and every narrow alley was used to their advantage. Lord Vare himself had entered the fight, his black armor gleaming under the flames. He moved through the streets, commanding his soldiers, attempting to crush the rebels in a single decisive strike. "Stand firm," Darren shouted to the fighters around him. "We do not fall today. We fight for our homes, for our people, and for our future." The humans answered with cries of courage. They had followed him and Alira not because of fear, but because of hope. Alira moved swiftly, guiding the fighters where they were needed most. Her knowledge of Valari tactics allowed them to anticipate attacks and turn them into traps. Soldiers fell into hidden pits, barricades cut off reinforcements, and narrow streets forced the army to slow, giving the rebels the advantage. Even as the battle raged, Alira noticed something remarkable. The Valari soldiers were faltering not only because of strategy, but because they faced humans who would not bow. Every soldier they overcame inspired another, until the city itself felt alive with courage. Darren's blade clashed with those who came too close. But he did not fight alone. Humans who had once carried baskets and tools now wielded swords and spears. They moved as one. Inspired by his calm strength and Alira's sharp guidance, Lord Vare's fury grew. He saw the army he believed unstoppable crumble under strategy and spirit. His voice thundered through the streets, "Crush them all. Leave none alive." But his commands met resistance at every turn. Every attack he ordered was met with preparation. In every corner of the city hid a defender. The humans were no longer scattered or fearful. They were united. At a key intersection, Vare himself confronted Darren and Alira. The streets were narrow, and the two of them stood together against the council's mightiest warrior. "You cannot win," Vare said, his voice cold and harsh. "You are weak. You are nothing but insects beneath my feet." Darren met his gaze steadily. "We are not weak, and we are not afraid." Alira stepped forward. "Your power comes from fear, but fear will not hold us. It will not control us. Today, your rule ends." Vare lunged, his blade flashing in the firelight. Darren met him with skill, parrying each strike. Alira moved alongside him, striking at openings and forcing Vare to retreat step by step. Every movement was precise, every attack coordinated. The humans around them surged forward, supporting their leaders, forcing the soldiers back into the narrow streets where they could not maneuver. Panic spread through the Valari ranks as they realized they could not dominate the city as they had intended. Finally, cornered and exhausted, Lord Vare fell to his knees. The streets echoed with silence as humans surrounded him. Darren lowered his blade but did not strike. Alira stood beside him, her eyes unwavering. "Your rule over fear is broken," she said. "The humans of Zathar will no longer bow to tyranny." The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, surrendered. The battle was over. The humans had not only survived, they had won. In the quiet after the battle, Darren and Alira walked through the streets together. Fires burned in some areas, but they were controlled, and the people worked to rebuild. The humans cheered for their leaders, not as masters or trophies, but as equals who had fought beside them. Alira paused, looking at Darren. "The council called me a trophy," she said softly, "and yet here I am, standing as your ally, not as a prize, but as someone who chose this path." Darren smiled, gentle and steady. "You are far more than that. You are brave, wise, and strong. And together, we have shown that courage can change the world." The people of Zathar gathered in the central square. Humans and a few Valari who had grown to respect justice stood together. Darren raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. "We have faced fear," he said, "and we have stood together. Today marks a new beginning. No longer will we be divided. No longer will we live under shadows. From now on, we will walk together as equals in body and spirit." Alira stepped beside him. "This city, our homes, our lives, they belong to everyone who lives here. We will protect them, and we will grow stronger, not through power over others, but through unity and respect." The crowd cheered, louder than any battle cry. Children ran through the streets, laughing, while elders looked on with tears. For the first time in centuries, Zathar was free from fear. Darren and Alira stood together, their hands brushing lightly. They had faced impossible odds, broken the chains of the past, and built a bond stronger than any empire. They had turned what was meant to be a trophy into a queen, a symbol of hope for all. And as dawn broke over the glowing towers, the city of Zathor welcomed a new era future shaped not by fear, but by courage, trust, and unity. The empire had tried to bind them, but they had risen above. Together, in body and soul, Darren and Alira had changed the world.